Hello everyone, in today's video we are gonna explain how to start writing your own commands and how to manage your own commands with your Highrise bot. We explained all about events before. We told you that events are the most important part in the bot. Now we're gonna move to the commands section, how to write commands, how to execute commands. So let's go ahead and start by opening our bot here. So we're gonna go again and do cmd in the path, and then we're gonna type code dot to open the project in our VS Visual Studio. So the things that we need right now is the documentation here, because we're gonna be using the post methods. I have a link in my description. It's highrise.sdk.add.potion.com. So this is the documentation that we're going to be following. We already covered all of this right here. We already covered all the get methods. Now it's time for us to start with the post methods. I'm not going to be using all of them right now. I'm going to be using some of them, sending messages, performing actions, fetching, for example, and then the basic ones and the most used ones, until we later on explain every single method step by step. So let's go ahead and go back to our code. Now in chat create here, I showed you how to create a basic a response from the bot. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna clear this entire thing, and I'm also gonna go ahead and clear this entire bot right here, since we don't need it anymore. I'm gonna remove the error. I don't need it. I'm gonna remove the things that I don't need, like the room moderates, player move. For example, I'm gonna keep player react emote. I'm gonna remove that. I'm also gonna remove the, actually, yeah, let's keep the react. Let's remove the leave, player join, message create, whisper create. That's all we need right now. And now we can get rid of the moderate movements tips, and we gotta leave the tips, right? Do we leave the tips? Yes. We left the reactions, we left the emote, we deleted the emote. That's perfect. So first of all, we are gonna have to create, actually we don't need the colors anymore. I was just showing you a test. So first of all, we are gonna need a prefix. What the prefix basically is this. So let's say the bot is receiving the messages. So whenever I say, for example, send a message hi, the bot is reading this message, and we said hello, it's reading the messages. Now we want to find a way to tell the bot that if the message that's being sent does not start with a specific symbol or a character, just ignore it. This way it will just make the things easier for us. So instead of the bot filtering all the message, it would just filter a message that maybe starts with this letter, this symbol, which is exclamation point, or slash, or dash, or anything that you want, which makes it a prefix. So prefixes usually work this way. So if we go to the game and we type, for example, exclamation point test, now this is a command because it starts with exclamation point. Now I can make it start with just test, but imagine this. If everyone types in the chat, the bot is going to go through all their messages, but we don't want that. We want the bot to go through only the messages that starts with exclamation point. And for that, we're going to create a new variable, and we're gonna call it prefix. So let's go ahead and say const prefix equal, and here we're gonna give it a value, and it's gonna be exclamation point. Now this variable is outside the events. Nothing is gonna go in the events, because we are gonna be using the prefix in the whisper create and in the message create later on. We could also move this to our config and just require it using, for example, if you put it in the config.js, if you go ahead and, for example, let's remove that, go to config, and here we do const prefix equal this, and we can pass in the prefix here, so we can require it later on in our app, which is the config right here. We're gonna do const prefix here. It's gonna be config.prefix, just like that. But we can also just get rid of this, and whenever we want to use the prefix, we just use config.prefix, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and get started. The very first thing that we need to do is we're going to check if the user ID starts with the bot ID. We're going to return if the user.id equal to the bot.info.user.id. Like I always said, we're just going to keep returning because we don't want the bot to listen to itself. Okay, so so the first thing we need to check for the bot if it's equal to the ID. Second thing, we are going to trim the message when someone sends a message. For example, let's say someone sends this message, hello world, like that, with a space. Now, first thing in this message, it has spaces, hello and world, and there's just space. So we're gonna trim that space. We're gonna remove it, and to do so, we can just create a new variable and call it const trimmed message equal message dot trim, just like that. Now this will trim the message that's being sent in the chat. So now we're gonna check if this message started with the prefix. If it doesn't start with the prefix, we're just gonna return, because we basically want to only accept commands. So we're gonna say if no trimmed messages dot starts with, and we're just gonna go ahead and do config dot prefix, because we already stored the prefix in our config. We are just gonna go ahead and return. This does not say anything. And for example, let's go ahead and say return bottom message dot send, and we can just send the message or the trimmed message in general. Oops, sorry. Okay, so if you go ahead and start the bot, this is just an example, and I will show you. To start the bot again, go to terminal and open new terminal, or use the Ctrl-Shift backticks. Again, node dot to start the bot. Now if you go to the room, and we can type anything here. So for example, anything. The bot's gonna reply with anything. But if you type, for example, test, the bot is not gonna say anything, because this means that the message is starting with the prefix that we want, right? So if I go ahead and do test dash test, it's gonna work. It's because I am not basically doing exclamation, but if I do test like this, it's not gonna work. And if I do hello, say this, it's gonna say hello, say this. This is just to show you that the trimmed message to start with config prefix is this is how it works. So let's just go ahead and return. Don't want to send a message, obviously. So now we're gonna define args. Args are usually comes after the the command. For example, this is a command, ping, okay? Or let's say this is a command. Now this is the prefix, this is the command, and there's args after the command. For example, this is args 0. Oops, sorry, args 0. Now this is args 1, args 3, and so on. It's a set of array. It's an array of words. For example, when we send a command, the console will print the following array. For example, here's args1, which is gonna be hello. For example, if we want the bot to say something, we will be using the args after the command, and we're gonna be taking those args and we're gonna be sending them to the bot, and we're gonna be like, hey bot, say this sentence. And and let's say this is just an example only. Say for example, let's say we have a command that is kick. If you want to kick someone from the room, or if you want to ban someone, let's just say kick, for example. Actually, let's go with more args. Let's go with mute, because a mute has a duration and stuff like that. So let's say we want to mute someone. If you want to mute someone, we need their first their username. So we're gonna do @user, and we're gonna need the duration of the mute. For example, let's say 60, as in 60 seconds. And we also need the reason why did we mute them. Like for example, spamming in chat. Now here we have one arg after the command, and then another arg for the duration, and then there's the third arg, which is the reason. So this would look something like this. The user is always gonna be the first args, is the 0, and then the duration is gonna be args1, and then the spamming in chat, since there's spaces in here, so instead of doing this arg and another arg, instead of having 3 arguments here, we're gonna have 1. So we're gonna do args, okay, dot slice, and we're gonna slice the number of the arg, which is 2. We're gonna slice the both args, and we're gonna join them together, so it's in one sentence. And this is what we're gonna be using later on. It's okay if you don't understand this. I'm gonna explain more about it in the examples. So let's go ahead and say const args equal trimmed messages dot slice, and we're gonna slice the prefix length. I'm gonna split, and there's our projects here. We're gonna add just like that. Then will define the args, the one I just showed you in this example right here. Let me just move. Okay, so const command equal args dot shift dot to lowercase just to get the first command. And if there's no command, we're just gonna if there's no command, we're just gonna return, because obviously we are only gonna listen to commands. And here we can start working with commands. So if you can say, for example, if you can say if command equal test, we're just gonna go ahead and say return bot.message that send this is a test command. Just an example. So just go ahead and refresh the bot, and you're gonna send test in the chat. So if you go ahead and say test, it's not gonna do anything. But if you do exclamation point test, it's gonna say this is a test command. Now, following this method, we're gonna have a bunch of different stuff right here. So we're gonna start working with arguments. Okay, so let's go ahead and make the code a little bit better. Go ahead and move this here, and now we're gonna say, gonna just go spaces, and if command equal say, let's start with the say command. Now after the say, we must have an prompt, like an input, right? So we gotta be, for example, we're gonna do this. We're gonna say hello, this is me. The bot will take this message and it's gonna say it, right? So how to do it, but is to do this, we're gonna do const message to send, for example, equal, it's gonna be args.join, because we're gonna take all the args after the say command. Because if I go ahead and I console log the args, so let me just go ahead and console log them. I was gonna say args here. You don't have to include this log, it's just gonna show you what it looks like when I log it. And we're gonna say if there's no message to send, we're gonna return a whisper to the user, and it's gonna take the user ID, and we're gonna say please provide an input, and we're gonna give it an example. For example, let's say example, and here we can pass in the prefix, config the prefix, say this is me, and we had to add it in quotation just to make it look better. So if I go ahead and after we check the if we start, and we're gonna say bot.message send, and we're gonna say message to send. If I go ahead and set the bot again, Control C, no dot to start it. Now if you do say, just like that, it's gonna say please provide an input, because say doesn't have any args. Because if you go here and we try to log the args, you can see it's an empty array, and we don't want it to be empty. So if I go back here and say this is a test, the bot is gonna say this is a test. Now if I go back to the args, you can see that each word is an arg. This is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. The only reason why we use to join, because we want to join them together. We want to join all the args together, and we're going to separate them by space. Args.join, the join method will join everything in the array, and since here we didn't provide anything, for example, if we provide a comma, it's going to join them with a comma, but since it's empty, it's going to join them in a sentence, and it's going to return that sentence, and the bot will send it back. And here we're going to do return, for example, if you want. But this is basically it. Now, another example to dig deep into the args. What we can do is we can come here and we're going to say if command equal add. Now here we can make a command that add the player as a designer or add the player as a moderator. And to do so, we can have them all in one command. So for example, we have the add. Here, let's go back here. So we have the add command. Now this is, let's say command name is add, right? Now after the add, we can add a subcommand. Now this subcommand can have the following subcommands. It's gonna have designer, and it's gonna have a moderator. Now the bot will take the designer, for example, and replace it with this subcommand, and it's gonna check if it's designer. We're gonna do specific things, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and say add and then username. This way we can add the designer or moderator to that user using their @. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we're gonna do const subcommands, or we can call it options if you want. Const options equal. It's gonna be an array. It's gonna be moderator and designer. So later on we can use this to return a message or an error if the options that we're trying to use is not included. So the option is going to be the first args, like I said before, which is going to be the first one, which is this, and it's going to be args 0. And here we can add .to lowercase. So if I do .to lowercase like this, and the user does not provide any args, it's going to return an error. And to avoid this, because lowercases will not be defined because the args is not defined, we could just add an exclamation mark here. This means that if the args are available, it will execute what's after it. Now this is the option for the moderator or designer. Now we're gonna check if there's no option. So we're gonna say if there's no option, or this is for the or in JavaScript, or no options dot includes option. This means there's no option if you don't provide an option. For example, if we just do add and we send it, it's gonna say check if there's no option after the add, whether it's moderator or if it's a designer like this. Okay, and if it's not included, for example, if we say add test, it's gonna return that it's not included. So we can go ahead and say if there's no option, we're gonna return bot.whisper.send, and we're gonna pass in the user ID, and we're gonna say please provide an option just like that, and we can pass in we can just do line break here, and we're gonna say example, and here we can pass the prefix, or let's just open the quotation config prefix. We're gonna say add moderator and at username like that, and we can say here available or just options. They're gonna be the options that we have over here, and we're gonna join them in a with a comma. So this will display them in with a options is display them with a comma, so it's going to look like something like this: moderator and then designer. So that's set. We're gonna choose the args for the username, which is the second arg. So const target equal args 1, which is going to be the first args after the option. Now the first args after the options, we want it to start with the @ right? So it makes it easier for us to mention players. So we can say if there's no target, or no target dot starts with an @ we're gonna return bot.whisper.send user.id, and we're gonna say please mention a user, and we can just copy this example right here, and we're gonna say example. You can just go ahead and copy this example right here. So example config. But since we already have an option, we can just replace the moderator here with the options that we already have. This way, it will say, for example, if you use moderator, it's going to give us an example for the moderator. If we use designer, it's going to give us an example for the designer. Now that's done. Now if we have a target, we want to take the target ID, because the method that we're going to be using is the where was it? Perform actions on player bot inbox. Room moderation, grant and revoke permission. It's going to be the designer.add, and it's going to be the moderator.add. Okay. So let's go ahead and go back to our code. And here we're going to say const user ID equal. We're going to use a method inside the JavaScript, which is going to be await bot.room.players.id to get the player ID. And it's going to be the target, which is the username. But since the target has to start with an @ we're gonna replace the target with we're gonna replace the @ with an empty string. And here we have an error. This is because we didn't include the async. So we're gonna make it an asynchronous function. And if we go back here, now we're gonna check if the user is in the room. So we're gonna say if there's no user ID, we're just gonna return message to the sender, and we're gonna say that this user We're gonna just pass in here target is not in the room. Just like that. Now that's done. Now there's a method here that we could use. We can say instead of creating one for each one, we can just say if option equal moderator. Here we're just gonna return bot.player.moderator.add, and here we pass in the user ID. Just like that. And here we can say else, or if option equal designer, just gonna return bot.player.designer.add, and it's gonna be the user ID, just like that. But to make things a little bit better or a little bit easier, this is what we do. We're gonna see if there's an option. If option equal to moderator, we basically add the moderator. So bot.player.moderator.add, and it's gonna be the user ID, or else this is also a method in JavaScript, just to make the code a little bit easier and better and more organized. Bot.designer.add. So this basically, those are the same, but instead of doing if and equal, just do if options equal to moderator, we just execute this. Else, which is this one, it's gonna be bot.player.designer. And here we can send a message, bot.message send, and here we could say, for example, at username, which is the player who executed the command, added, and then we're gonna be the target as a, and the option, which is the user who sent the command added the target that we want as a, and the option that we chose earlier, which is designer or moderator. And here we can just return, just like that. And if you want to send a message to the other party, or the opposite, like the target, you can just go ahead and say bot.whisper send, and you're gonna take the user ID, which is the user ID for the target. And just to make things a little bit easier for you, we're just gonna do target ID here instead of user ID, like that. Replace those. So this is gonna be sent to the the target, and we're gonna say at username added you as a, it's gonna be the moderator or the designer. So if you go ahead and refresh, Control C not dot. Now if you try to add, use the command add, it's gonna say please provide an option, example add moderator and then username. Options are moderator designer. So if you add this add test, it's gonna return the same message because test is not an option, so only moderator and designer. So if you add moderator, it's gonna return please mention user. And if you say add moderator, and here we could say, for example, test, it's gonna say please mention a user because we didn't include the at. But if we do add moderator and add test, it's gonna say that this user is not in the room because test is not in the room. Instead, let's go ahead and try to add myself as a moderator. Let's go ahead and say add moderator at Hussein, which is my username, and there you go. Added Hussein as moderator. That's it. Here you can see everything is working perfectly fine. But now let's go ahead and say, for example, we don't want everyone to use this command, and for that we can do something which is really nice right here. So if you only want the owner to use the command, we can say if user.id does not equal to the bot.info.owner.id, it's going to return bot.whisper to send to whoever is executing the command. We're going to tell him you don't have permissions to use this command. Oops, sorry, command, just like that. So now if I go ahead and refresh this, no dot, if I try to use the, you're not going to see it, but if I try to use the command add moderator, and we're going to pass in the username, it's not going to let me. And here if I go back here, you don't have permission to use this command because it whispered to me. Just like this, I explained the args and I explained everything related to the args. You can have a bunch of, if you want to add custom moderators, you can do this. You can go to the config, for example, const moderators equal, there's going to be an array. You can pass in the names, for example, Libanu, for example, Ihsan, just like that. Now we can go back to the app. We can get rid of this sentence right here. So we can just actually, let's just change this. So let's move this down and change this. And I'm gonna say if. So if no config. This is how we access the oh, did we? Yep, yeah, we forgot moderators here. Okay, so I have to require it. So config dot moderators dot includes, and this is gonna be the user not name, username. We're just gonna return the message whisper. You don't have permission to use this command. So if I go ahead and refresh, try again, and add moderator, it should work perfect. See? That's it. This is how you set up permissions, this is how you set up commands, this is how you use args, and this is everything. Now I'm gonna be explaining how to handle the events, how to handle the commands later on in our next episode. So if you find this helpful, or if you have any questions, please let me know on Discord. And I hope you guys are following, and I hope you guys are not having a hard time understanding how everything works.